Vandersvik Fancast, Episode 1 of Snow Globes and Soulmates by MallowLeaf. Pairings for this fic include lamp or calm.
Snow globes were special things. They were a link to one's soulmate, a way to find the person that would complete them. Each snow globe was unique, a perfect image of what one's soulmate valued above all. Finding your soulmate was made all the easier by deciphering the little clues left behind in the snow globe. Roman had 3 snow globes. The first had a dark blue base, with an intricate pattern carved into the sides, winding up and around the sides of the base. Inside was a small bookstore, with a table in the center filled with baking supplies and loose papers that would flutter around when Roman shook the globe. The second had a light blue base, with small hearts dotting the sides. Inside was a winter scene, with people ice skating and small animals running around in the snow. Whenever Roman would move the globe, snow fell merrily onto the figures below. And the final snow globe had a purple base, so dark that in certain lights it almost looked black. The inside was dominated by trees, with leaves turned different colors by the autumn air inside the globe. The details were very fine-tuned, with spiderwebs reaching across the branches, and if Roman looked closely, he could see small references to different Disney movies hidden within the leaves. A small yellow bear curled up in the branches, a deer and a rabbit grazing near the edge of the globe. When Roman shook it, leaves would swirl around and obscure the globe in a whirl of color. And Roman loved all of his globes with all of his heart. Having more than one snow globe was quite a rare thing. It meant that he had more than one soulmate, an exciting prospect. Roman had known more people in his life that didn't have any soulmate, let alone be lucky as he was to have 3 people out in the world meant to complete him. Roman couldn't wait to meet them. He carried the snow globes around with him everywhere, carefully wrapped up as to not damage them. Roman wasn't exactly sure what would happen if he cracked the glass on the globe or dropped them on the ground. Didn't know if a mistake like that would cost him his chance to meet his soulmates, but he wasn't prepared to risk something like that. Roman was very capable of being reckless at the worst of times, but when it came to his soulmates, Roman made sure to take every precaution. Of course, snow globes weren't the perfect link to one's soulmates. They just offered hints, not guarantees of finding the soulmate that the globe predicted. But Roman remained hopeful and did his best to soak in every single clue that his snow globes offered in order to find his soulmates. He would stroll through autumn-tinged forests, hoping to find the owner of the purple snow globe among the brightly colored leaves. He would skate along ice-coated lakes gracefully, hoping to stumble across the owner of the light blue snow globe skating around him. And he lingered in quiet bookstores, hoping to see the owner of the dark blue globe leafing through a book in front of him. But he had no luck with his quest, until he went to college. His roommate was an uptight man named Logan Lowe, and it was safe to say that he and Roman didn't get along well, at all. The biochemistry major didn't appreciate it when Roman belted show tunes in the middle of the night while he was trying to study. He would get back at Roman by turning their shared kitchen space into a glorified lab area and stored his experiments in the fridge. Most of their interactions ended with them on opposite sides of their dorm, fuming and vowing to themselves that they would never speak to the other again. It wasn't until the midway point of their first year of rooming together that they started seeing eye to eye. Like that one night Logan helped Roman with his lines for the latest production that fall, he had approached Roman, who had been fruitlessly trying to memorize his lines in the middle of the living room, and ran through the lines with him. It was that night when Roman discovered that Logan was a rather big fan of Shakespeare, and soon Roman's lines were left to the side as the two discussed their favorite plays long into the night. Another night, Roman had walked into the kitchen to see Logan surrounded by bowls filled with batter and cooling cookies. It was such an odd sight to see Logan aggressively whisking eggs into a bowl, and Roman nearly dropped his phone when he saw it. His first course of action was, of course, to try what Logan had been baking.
Baking is a science,
Logan had sheepishly explained when Roman demanded to know what kind of witchcraft Logan had used to make the cookies taste so good.
It requires a specific combination of ingredients and baking time to come out just right. It's a precise and calming process that I use to distress.
Soon, it was a common thing to see Logan baking long into the night, and more often than not, Roman would volunteer to help out, although he mostly just used his time to be Logan's personal taste tester. It was well into their junior year when Roman pulls out the dark blue snow globe from its perch in his closet and shows it to Logan. He had roomed with Logan for close to 3 years now, and Roman was confident that Logan was the owner of the dark blue snow globe. The bookstore was reminiscent of the way Logan spent most of his time surrounded by books, and the baking supplies pretty obviously represented Logan's affinity for baking. It took him a few weeks to gather the courage to show Logan, and when he finally did, Logan's first reaction was shocked silence. He stared at the snow globe before gently taking it out of Roman's hands and holding it himself, inspecting each detail with a careful eye. He traced the pattern on the side with a finger and peered into the glass to look at each paper that lay on the table. And then he placed the snow globe down on the kitchen table and walked away down the hallway. For a brief second, Roman panicked. Logan had walked away, which meant that he was upset by Roman assuming that he was his soulmate, when he was clearly not. Why was he such a rash idiot? But then Logan came back, and he was holding a snow globe in his hands. It had a red base, and Logan held it gently, as if afraid any sudden movement would cause it to get damaged. He carefully handed it over to Roman, who took it cautiously. As soon as Roman wrapped his hands around the base, a warmth grew in Roman's hands and traveled up his arms. Peering through the glass, Roman saw a stage with a figure standing with his arms outstretched, surrounded by rolled-up scrolls and people watching the performer. When Roman gently shook the globe, gold dust flew up and surrounded the figure on stage, painting him in a brilliant golden glow. Roman glanced back up at Logan in shock, still clutching the snow globe tightly in his hands. It was emitting a warmth that Roman had never felt from any of his snow globes before.
Does this mean?
He asked, unable to finish his thought. Logan smiled. It was one of his genuine smiles, one that Roman had only seen on a few rare occasions.
Yes, I think it does.
Roman paused long enough to put down the snow globe gently before he launched himself at Logan and crushed him into a hug. It wasn't until after the two had graduated college that they found their second soulmate. During that time, Logan and Roman had gotten an apartment together. 4 years of rooming together in tight quarters was more than enough time to get them used to each other's habits, such as Roman's affinity for singing as loud as he could at any time of day, and Logan's habit of leaving experiments in the fridge right next to their food. Roman had only drunk one of the experiments once by accident, but had been reassured by Logan that nothing bad would happen, as that particular experiment was far from dangerous. And nothing did happen, although Logan was far more careful about leaving unmarked flasks lying around after that. It was during this time that Roman learned that while Logan had 3 snow globes with base colors that matched his own, the insides of the said snow globes varied from his own. In Logan's light blue snow globe, there were a variety of different kinds of dogs and cats, all playing in what looked like some kind of playground or dog park. When comparing the 2 light blue snow globes, Roman and Logan decided that the owner of the snow globe must love animals and winter, especially ice skating. In Logan's purple snow globe, there was a lone piano sat on a deserted stage with a pair of black headphones curled up on top. When comparing the 2 purple snow globes, Roman and Logan came to the conclusion that the owner of the purple snow globe must play the piano and have an appreciation of the fall. Their snow globes were kept on the windowsill, positioned so that when the sun hit them just right, they would sparkle and shine. It was also around that time when Roman met Patton Foster. There was a local coffee shop right near Roman and Logan's apartment, and Roman had soon become a frequent customer. Owned by soulmates Remy and Emil Picani, the Coffee Bean was a warm and friendly place that Roman enjoyed spending time in. He became fast friends with Remy, whose over-the-top dramatics were enough to rival Roman's own. It was during one of their many conversations that Roman learned Remy had a brother. At first, Roman didn't think too much of it. All he learned was that his brother's name was Patton, and he was quite the opposite of Remy. Where Remy was sarcastic, rather dramatic, and overly flirtatious, Patton was bubbly and enthusiastic, and rather clueless when it came to things like romance. And then Patton walked into the cafe one day, and Roman promptly fell head over heels in love.
He was so cute,
Roman had said that night when Logan came home from work.
He was short and had curly hair and wore glasses kind of like yours, and...
And how long have you known him?
Logan asked, raising an eyebrow. His voice was colored with amusement.
Well, just for today. But he said hello to me when Remy introduced us, and he was wearing a sweater with a dog on it, and oh, Logan, you should have seen him.
Roman gushed. Logan just laughed and shook his head. And as soon as he could, Roman brought Logan to the cafe to meet Patton. Roman had been correct in the assumption that Logan would share his sentiment about Patton when he met him. And although Logan would never admit it, Roman was 100% right. After Patton had shaken Logan's hand and greeted him cheerfully, he had been reduced to a blushing, stuttering mess.
You like him,
Roman said with a grin as soon as Patton was out of earshot.
Be quiet,
Logan said as he straightened his tie. Over the next few weeks, the 3 began to grow closer. They would spend more and more time with each other. It was then that Patton shared that he worked at a shelter, helping to care for the animals while he worked to get his veterinary degree. Patton would occasionally bring Roman and Logan to work and let them play with the animals with him. It also became a common occurrence to have movie nights at each other's apartments once a week. When they were at Patton's place, Patton chose what they watched, and when they were at Roman and Logan's place, the two would switch control of movies back and forth between them. That week, it was Roman's turn to pick the movies. Roman and Patton were dressed in what amounted to pajamas, and even Logan had relaxed his usual attire to a less casual shirt and sweatpants. Roman was in the process of choosing between two Disney movies when Patton turned his attention to the snow globes that were sat on the windowsill.
Are those all of your snow globes?
He asked, gazing over each one with curiosity.
Yes, they are.
Logan said from where he was positioned in his favorite armchair.
3 are Roman's and 3 are mine.
Wow.
Patton said softly.
It's not often you see someone with more than one snow globe.
Yes, the statistical probability of having more than one snow globe is rather lower than average.
Logan said, sitting up and adjusting his glasses. He sounded excited. There were few things Logan enjoyed more than talking about statistics.
I recently read a rather fascinating study on it if you would like to read it.
That sounds really cool, kiddo.
Patton said absent-mindedly.
Would you mind if I took a closer look at them?
I don't see why not, as long as you are careful with them.
Logan said, glancing over at Roman to see if he agreed.
Of course you can.
Roman said, not looking up from the Disney movies that were splayed out in front of him. Patton smiled his thanks before getting up and padding over to the window where the snow globes were. He inspected the dark blue and red globe first, lightly ghosting his fingers over the bases. He seemed particularly fascinated over the rich color of the bases, spending more time inspecting them than the actual contents of the globes. He moved his gaze to the purple snow globe. His frown of concentration deepened as he took in the dark color and jagged silvery pattern on the base that was identical on each globe, and then his attention was drawn to the two light blue snow globes on the edge of the windowsill. He moved over to them, curiously examining the inside of the globes. Patton looked over his shoulder to make sure that Roman and Logan's attention was somewhere else, and then reached out to touch the base. As soon as his fingers brushed the light blue base, a warmth filled his palms and up his arms. Patton jerked back as if he was burned.
Is everything all right, Patton?
Logan asked.
Yeah. Sorry.
Patton said with a smile that was a bit too bright.
Did you pick a movie yet, Ro?
Roman held up a DVD box triumphantly from where he sat on the floor.
You better believe it.
Patton let out a laugh and sat down on the couch next to Logan, waiting as Roman started up the movie. He made no remark about the snow globes. He didn't mention them until the next time Roman and Logan came over to his apartment. It was Patton's turn to host the movie night, and Roman and Logan had arrived early, as usual. Patton had greeted them as usual, but then hesitated when Roman and Logan went to sit in the living room.
I need to show you something,
he said instead, looking nervous before disappearing down the hall. They only had a few moments to wait before Patton returned with his hands behind his back.
So,
Patton cleared his throat nervously.
I probably should have brought this up sooner, but I was a bit nervous and... well...
His speech faded, and he pulled his hands from behind his back, revealing two snow globes, a dark blue in his left hand and a bright red in his right. For a moment, no one moved. The apartment was silent. And then Roman walked over and gently took the red snow globe from Patton into his own hands. Almost immediately, a warmth spread between Roman's palms. He beamed down at the globe, holding a figure dancing to music only it could hear, before turning to look back at Patton.
Patton Foster,
Roman said, beaming at his newly found second soulmate.
I'm so glad I met you.
Roman almost didn't realize he had met his third soulmate. In the middle of the mall where Roman worked, there was a large grand piano placed, open to anyone who wanted to go at playing it. And every day, at 2 p.m. precisely, a man would sit down and play for an hour before leaving. He always wore a thick black hoodie. His hair, a vibrant shade of purple that blended into the natural black of his hair, was always hanging down in his face, and he was an incredible piano player. Out of all the times Roman had heard this man play, it's always been something that sounded too good to be playing in the busy center of a mall. Sometimes the music was something Roman recognized, like video game themes or Disney medleys. And sometimes the music was unrecognizable, some classical piece that Roman had never heard of. But either way, Roman loved it. He began making it a point to listen to the player, always finding some excuse to be near the piano when it hit 2 o'clock. The player never stayed past an hour. He would play his music, and, when the time was up, he would get up and leave as quietly as he came. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't even make eye contact as he walked away, just kept his head down and disappeared into the crowds. Which infuriated Roman to no end, because not only did the player just disappear, but he also ignored any and all attempts Roman made to talk to him.
He's doing it on purpose,
Roman complained one night to Patton and Logan, lying dramatically across the couch with his head in Patton's lap.
Well, maybe he's just shy,
Patton suggested, combing his fingers through Roman's hair.
Not everyone is as social as you, Ro.
Why don't you find something in common with him? That might make it easier to start a conversation.
Logan said from where he was curled up in an armchair with a book.
And how do you suppose I do that? I've never even talked to the guy.
Logan raised an eyebrow.
You can play the piano, right?
Sorta. What's your point?
I'm merely suggesting that you try and strike up a conversation about the intricacies of playing, or even attempt to play with him yourself.
Roman sat up quickly with a gasp.
Logan, you're a genius.
I'm well aware.
Logan said with a badly concealed grin. Roman quickly threw himself into learning a few songs. He was never very good at the piano. He found string instruments to be easier for him to play, but he was passable, and soon he was able to pound out a few different tunes. The next time Roman saw the player, he didn't hesitate to plop right down next to him on the piano bench, causing the player to stop abruptly during a particularly upbeat rendition of Blood, which Roman believed to be by that emo band My Chemical Romance, or something like that. Roman's never been one for emo or punk music.
What are you doing?
The player snapped, turning to glare at Roman. Pretty hostile first words, but Roman could work with them.
Well,
Roman said cheerily.
my name's Roman Prince, and I thought it might be fun to play with you. You know, sort of like a duet.
The player stared at Roman, gaze unreadable, before he scowled and pushed himself off the bench.
Unbelievable,
he muttered as he stalked away. Roman pouted as he watched him walk away. He tried the same thing over the next couple of weeks. Sit down to try and talk with the player, get a negative response, rinse and repeat. It wasn't until the third week of Roman bothering the player before he snapped.
Why can't you leave me alone?
The player said, crossing his arms and glaring down at Roman where he sat on the piano bench. He had gotten there early that day, intending to intercept the player before he even played a note.
Not until you let me play with you,
Roman said, gesturing his hands wildly to try and make his point.
What could be so bad about playing with me?
The player threw his head back and let out a particularly loud sigh.
If I play with you, will you leave me alone?
Yes, I promise,
Roman said, raising his hand above his head to seem more trustworthy.
Fine.
The player plopped down on the bench next to Roman and eyed him.
You start.
Roman cleared his throat nervously and began to play. It was a simple song, mostly just chords, but it was one that he had played quite a lot and was familiar with. He got through a few bars before he saw the player looking at him out of the corner of his eyes, raising an eyebrow.
Grim Grinning Ghost.
He asked skeptically.
Really?
I learned it just for you, Doom and Gloom,
Roman said with a grin. The player let out a low chuckle and rolled his eyes, and then he started playing alongside Roman, and instantly the music began to sound 10 times better. Instead of playing a similar style of music to Roman, the player began to rag the piece, intertwining upbeat, syncopated rhythms within the music, perfectly timed. It was a way of playing that had never even crossed Roman's mind, and yet the player was accomplishing it perfectly. His fingers danced across the keys, never pausing or slowing down. It was amazing, and it took all of Roman's self-control to keep playing the main chords instead of stopping to watch the player himself. When the piece was over, Roman leaned back and gaped at the player.
That was incredible,
he said, eyes wide.
How did you learn to do that?
The player's eyes sparkled.
That's for me to know, and you to find out, Frenzy.
He saluted Roman and then got up from the bench.
See you later.
Wait,
Roman blurted out, but it was too late. The player was already halfway across the center of the mall and made no movement to turn back. It was a few weeks before Roman saw the player again, but in that time he had done some snooping and found out that the player's name was Virgil, and that he worked in the store quite close to where Roman worked. So instead of waiting for the player, or Virgil, to go to the piano, Roman decided to face him head-on in his own store. And of course he worked in Hot Topic. As soon as Roman took a single step into Hot Topic, he was bombarded by the sound of heavy rock music. He wrinkled his nose. How anyone could ever enjoy the sound of out-of-tune guitars and loud screaming was beyond him. Roman scanned the store and saw Virgil standing at the register, looking bored as he flipped through a packet. Shoving his hands into his pockets, Roman sauntered up to the counter.
well, fancy meeting you here,
Roman said, successfully startling the employee.
though I suppose it does fit your emo aesthetic.
Never thought you'd be the kind to shop at a store like this, Frenzy.
Virgil said, doing a mostly successful job of hiding the fact he had jumped and dropped the packet when Roman had started speaking.
You couldn't catch me dead shopping in here.
Roman said, voice colored with humor.
No, I came in here looking for you.
And how did you figure out I worked here?
I have my sources.
Roman said mysteriously. Virgil raised an eyebrow.
You followed me, didn't you?
Roman smiled sheepishly.
Yeah, but that's beside the point.
He waved his hands out dramatically and knocked over a display stand.
Sorry, I have a question for you.
Virgil watched the cards fall to the floor before looking back at Roman.
Please elaborate before you break anything else.
Roman flushed before clearing his throat.
Will you
He said, pausing dramatically for effect.
go out with me on a date?
There was a pause, and then
You followed me, so you could ask me out.
Virgil asked, looking confused.
Yes,
Roman said, looking pleased.
but only if you want to. I promise I'm not going to kill you or anything stalkerish.
Darn.
Virgil said in a monotone voice. He furrowed his brow, looking like he was considering it, and then said,
Fine. I don't have anything better to do.
Roman beamed in victory.
You won't regret this, I promise.
He said, grabbing a flyer from a pile near the register and scribbling down his number before shoving it in Virgil's direction.
I'm already starting to.
Virgil grumbled, but he took the paper with Roman's number and shoved it into his pocket. Roman beamed all the way home, and as soon as he opened the door, broke the news to his soulmates.
You finally talked to him!
Patton cheered after Roman had told them the whole story.
That's great, Ro.
I know, right?
Roman said, smile still stuck on his face.
I have to introduce you both to him. You'll love him.
You should let him know about us when you meet up with him.
Logan said, always the voice of reason.
Make sure he's okay with the idea of the three of us first, before things get too serious.
You're so smart, Lo.
Roman said, walking over and pressing a kiss to Logan's cheek. Logan blushed and adjusted his glasses, unable to form a response. Virgil waited 3 days later to text Roman, sending him a simple hey to let Roman know it was him. After texting back and forth, the two decided on meeting in the park that following weekend. Roman was the first to arrive and sat down on the nearest park bench, waiting for Virgil to arrive. When the piano player finally did, they began to walk around the park, keeping a small space between them as they traveled around the park. They talked about a lot of things, music, movies, and other things. Nothing of too much importance or weight, until Roman brought up the topic of soulmates.
So,
Roman said conversationally.
soulmates. Am I right?
Yeah.
Virgil said, not following where Roman was going with the sudden topic change.
I have 3.
Roman said, his voice softening.
I found 2 of mine, but we're still looking for our last soulmate.
There was a small pause as Roman and Virgil had to dodge out of the way of some small children who had ran down the path, nearly knocking them over, and then Roman glanced over at Virgil.
What about you?
Virgil looked a bit uncomfortable, and he avoided Roman's gaze.
I, haven't found any of my soulmates yet.
Just one soulmate? More than one?
Roman asked curiously. Virgil rolled his eyes.
You're really pushy, you know that?
Roman just grinned.
Fine, I have more than one soulmate.
Virgil grumbled, crossing his arms.
Happy?
Was that so hard to admit?
Roman teased, bumping his shoulder into Virgil's. Virgil just shook his head in response and hid a small smile behind his hand. They ended the walk a little while later. Virgil had work and Roman had to meet up with Logan. They agreed to meet up at a later date and took their leave of one another.
How did it go?
Logan asked when Roman had shown up, face flushed and out of breath from running the last few blocks to make sure he was on time.
It went great.
Roman said with a grin, sliding into the seat across from Logan.
I need to find time to introduce him to you and Patton. You'll love him, Lo.
Logan let out a small laugh.
You've been right before, so I have no doubt you're right about this.
That's what I like to hear.
Roman cheered. A few weeks passed before Virgil and Roman met up again. This time, Roman suggested that Virgil come over to his apartment so they could play some video games. Virgil was hesitant. Going to a practically stranger's house didn't seem like a good time to him. But Virgil eventually let himself be persuaded and agreed to come over.
Welcome to mi casa.
Roman cheered as he opened the front door of his apartment, revealing Virgil standing in the hallway with his hands shoved deep into his pockets.
Hello, Princey.
Virgil said, stepping into the apartment and glancing around him.
Not bad.
Why, thank you.
Roman said, closing the front door before slipping around Virgil into the living room, where he'd already set up the game system.
Now prepare yourself for defeat.
Virgil snorted and shook his head.
You underestimate my abilities.
What followed was a ferocious Mario Kart battle, in which Roman lost nearly every race to Virgil.
You've got to be kidding me.
Roman complained as Virgil raced by him to win at the last moment yet again.
So much for my defeat.
Virgil said with a grin.
What were you saying about being the best at this game?
It's not my fault.
Roman cried.
It was the stupid computer. It kept giving you blue turtle shells.
And you falling off every 2 minutes had nothing to do with it,
Virgil asked. Roman's only response was to throw a pillow at Virgil's head.
I call timeout,
He said, pushing himself to his feet and heading towards the kitchen.
I take your retreat as a sign of defeat.
Virgil called after Roman's back. Roman flipped him off in response. Putting down the controller, Virgil took the opportunity to look more closely around the apartment. The living room was decorated with a warm, cozy feel. It was also one of the neatest rooms that Virgil had ever seen. The shelves were arranged as if the person organizing them had a specific order in mind. There was not a speck of dust anywhere. All in all, it looked nothing like Virgil had pictured. He had figured Roman was a much messier person. Perhaps it was his soulmates keeping Roman from destroying the place. Speaking of soulmates, Virgil turned his head and looked over at the windowsill, where a cluster of snow globes were arranged with care. They sparkled prettily in the sunlight, throwing beams of light dancing across the walls. Virgil pushed himself up into a standing position and walked over to them.
Pretty cool, aren't they?
Roman said, appearing from out of nowhere.
Holy shit!
Virgil gasped, jumping about a foot in the air.
Warn a guy before you sneak up on him.
Sorry.
Roman winced.
So, these are your soulmates?
Virgil asked, gesturing to the snow globes.
Yeah!
Roman said.
The dark blue ones are Logan's, the light blue ones are Patton's, and the red ones are mine.
And the purple ones?
Roman shrugged.
We haven't found the owner of the purple ones yet, but we will soon.
Virgil just hummed in response. He walked over closer to the windowsill and leaned in closer to the globes.
Interesting.
He muttered under his breath.
What?
Roman asked.
It's just nothing. Don't worry about it.
Virgil moved from one end of the windowsill to the other, taking in each little detail within the globes.
No, what?
Roman said. He picked up the dark blue globe and brushed some of the dust that had settled on top of the globe.
What's interesting?
Virgil glared at Roman but complied.
Those colors are very similar to the snow globes I have.
Roman nearly dropped the snow globe he was holding.
I'm sorry, what?
Those blues and that red.
Virgil said, pointing to the snow globes.
I have all those colors back at home.
Roman's eyes widened.
No way.
He gently placed the blue snow globe down before leaning over and grabbing one of the purple snow globes.
Here, hold this.
Whoa, hold up!
Virgil spluttered, fumbling with the snow globe before he managed to get a grip on it. He stood there for a moment, just staring at the globe with a furrowed brow. But then Roman watched as Virgil's grip on the globe tightened.
Holy shit.
He said, glancing back and forth between Roman and the globe.
I think...
Roman let out a cheer and picked up Virgil in a hug, spinning him around and nearly crushing him.
Wait until we tell Logan and Patton. They're going to love you. Thank you for listening to Fander's Fic Fancast. Fander's Fic Fancast is produced and directed by Lucy the Android. For all updates, please visit our Tumblr page, fanders-podfic-podcast.tumblr.com.